Okay, so I got most of my stuff ready to go. All my ingredients. I pre-measured all my hops, starting top to bottom. My 3 ounce of Simcoe. Then I got my 1/2 ounce of Crystal, 1/2 ounce of Simcoe, and I have my 1 ounce of Simcoe and 1 ounce of Crystal. I'll explain that in the hops edition. I've got them pre-measured, already laid out, so I won't be fumbling around when the time comes and miss my schedule. I took my specialty grain, put it in. This is actually a nylon bag. A lot of people call it a hops bag, and I'll actually be using this for my hops too when it comes time to use those. But first of all, I'm going to use it to steep my specialty grains. So basically I got everything ready. This is going to be my fermenter. I usually use a glass carboy, but for this one I'm going to use this plastic bucket. And this is where you want to, sanitizing everything's very important. Make sure your stuff's clean. It's not as big of a deal before you ferment the beer. After the beer is cooked and getting ready to ferment, that's the main time when you want to make sure everything's sanitized. So anyway, I've got my bucket cleaned out. I always clean everything after I get done using it, but it's always a good idea to clean it again before you use it. This bucket, as you can see, has graduated lines on it. I'll know how much water I have to pour in my brew bucket. So basically I'm going to go ahead and fill this up, dump it into my brew kettle, and then I'll show you how to use the sanitizer. What I use is Star San. It's basically it's an acid-based sanitizer. It's food grade. It will not hurt you. You could drink it if you wanted to. You dilute it. It's almost like a one of those 2-cycle oil jugs you get for weed eater or boat gas. So it's got a way you can pre-measure it here. Basically you squeeze the jug, it fills up this reservoir here, and then you can just dump it into your bucket or whatever you're needing sanitizer for. Okay, one last thing I kind of forgot to mention. One of the other ingredients, you don't have to use this, but it will help to make for clear beer. As you can see, that's pretty clear. That's one of my home brews, and it looks like something that you would pour out of a bottle. One of the things that helps that, there's several things that influence it. One is going to be the hot and cold break, and I'll explain that. The second is going to be Irish moss. There are several different kinds you can get. I use a kind called super moss. It's basically it's the Irish moss, but it's modified to be in a powder form. You can see it's just a white powder. The normal Irish moss looks just like parsley, oregano, something like that. It looks like dehydrated moss. So I'm going to take, this calls for 1/4 teaspoon, which is a tiny bit, for a 5-gallon batch. The way you do it, you use that super moss. If you're using the super moss, if you're using the Irish moss, you don't have to do this. But the super moss, you put that 1/4 teaspoon in there, mix it with water, shake it up, just make sure it's dissolved. It's not going to be completely dissolved. I'll come back in, let it sit, and I'll shake it up several more times, make sure it's dissolved. You add that in right at the last, I believe this says the last 10 minutes. Yeah, the last 10 minutes of your boil when you're doing your beer. And what that does is it helps bind the proteins in the beer and help them settle out during the fermentation process. And that's basically going to take all that cloudiness, or a good part of it, out of your beer, and it's going to make it a lot more clear when it's bottled or kegged. Like I said, that's pretty clear beer. You can see right through it, and that's the purpose of that. You don't have to use it, but I've just always used it. So I've got my bucket filled with water. Basically all homebrew batches are going to be 5-gallon batches. I don't know if you can see the line. I've got it a little over 4.5 gallons. A 5-gallon batch, there's 2 different kinds of boils you can do. You can do a full boil, or you can do a partial boil. Partial boil is if like you're doing it on your cooktop inside the house, which I wouldn't recommend unless you live alone and or you don't mind pissing your wife off if it boils over, because it makes a big mess. It also depends on the size of your brew kettle. I started off with a turkey fryer when I first started. It works fine, except for it's an aluminum pot. You have to do a few things to make that aluminum pot where you can use it before you do. Then I switched to a keggle. It's basically a full 15-gallon keg with the top cut out. The advantage of that is it's stainless steel, and they're a little hard to get because you have to put deposits on them. It's illegal to keep them a lot of times, but if you find an old one, it works great for a brew kettle. A lot of home brewers use that for a brew kettle. So the reason that I'm using 4.5 gallons of water instead of 5 is that I'm going to be adding 9 pounds of this malt extract to it. So it's going to bring the water level up to more than 5 gallons. Be aware that you are going to lose some volume during the boil, especially right now. It's February. It's not too cold outside, but it is cooler than summertime. So there will be a lot of steam coming off the wort when it's boiling. So this will bring it up over the 5-gallon mark. It'll get me close to a 5-gallon batch. If I need extra water at the end to top it off, that's no problem. You can add water to it. It'll also kind of help cool it down. But anyway, we're about ready to start. I'll dump that in there, fire up the burner. Okay, so got the brew kettle going. It's heating up, and I talked about using sanitizer, Star San, acid-based sanitizer. It's great. It's easy. So basically, I'm going to make a 5-gallon batch. Like I said before, you can see the little graduated pre-measure thing there, whatever you would call it, bubble. Basically, you just squeeze it. See it filling up. Get up to the 1 ounce line. Take it. Dump it into your bucket in a little bit of water, just out of the regular faucet. Then I'll switch to the spray. Basically, the spray is going to add bubbles. The bubbles, I mean, they seem to coat better. But you'll be using this sanitizer for the whole rest of your brew process. So, so don't throw it out. Preferably, you'll have another bucket you can pour it in if you need to use this bucket. This bucket is going to be my fermenter, so this sanitizer is going to sit in there while I'm brewing. They say to let it remain in contact 10 to 15 minutes to make sure it, I don't know, that it penetrates, that it does, you know, it gets everywhere it needs to, and just make sure everything's coated. So as you can see right now, this is my my brew kettle. It's like I said, it's just an old keg. Turkey fryer hooked to a propane tank, and it's heating up right now. I've actually used some of the pieces out of my turkey fryer. The lid fits on there perfect. I got a thermometer in there. It won't actually reach the bottom, but that hole will, it just gives me a spot to put that thermometer in there. Lift the top off, you can see the water. It's clear. It's starting to steam. It's probably not actually that hot yet, but you'll see the change in the color once I put that specialty grain in there. It's going to look a lot different, and you can see where the beer is going to get its color. Okay, so heated up the water in my brew kettle. I've got my specialty grains. I've got it tied onto this is a food grade, I don't know if it's Teflon or plastic spoon, but I use this in my brewing all the time. So basically, I'm going to put this into my brew water there, and we're going to leave this for about 25 minutes. Two of the tools you need to make sure you have is a timer of some sort. I use my iPhone. You can use that, you can use a kitchen timer, whatever. You just need a timer. because that's what you want to do, is get in there exact right time. So I'm gonna grab my timer real quick, and I've already got it set to 25 minutes. So I'm gonna drop this specialty grain in there, start it, drop it in here, and as you saw a few minutes ago, it was clear water. When this comes out, it'll be probably a fairly dark brown. What I'm going to do is I'm going to check this probably about every 4 or 5 minutes for the entire 25-minute duration, and every time I do, I'll steep it, I'll pull it out, let it drain, steep it some more, and basically just let it hang out. You want to make sure you keep it around 155 degrees. In this big of a kettle with this much water heated up and it's metal, it's going to stay that temperature. I just know because I've used it many times, so I know it'll hold that temperature for longer than I need it to. You don't want to go higher than 155, 160 degrees, because then you pass the point in which you extract the sugars, the unfermentables, all that out, and it can actually add to off flavors. So don't get it hotter than that. Don't leave it on the heat. Just get it at that temperature and steep it for 25 minutes. And then after that, we get ready to pull it out and go for the actual adding of the malt. One thing to remember when you do this is when you pull the specialty grains out, you don't want to squeeze the bag. You tend to have the tendency to want to get all that out of there that you can. The best thing to do is just to let it drain, hang it up if you can some way, and just let it sit there and drain, because if you squeeze that, the shells and the husks of the grain contain what are they're called tannins. So if you squeeze that, you're going to release those tannins, and it makes for a really undesirable bitter flavor. So don't squeeze it, just let it drain. Once you're done, you can throw it out, let the birds eat it, whatever. You can throw it in the trash. I usually just throw it in my yard so the birds can eat something. You cannot do that with hops. Once your hops are spent, and that just fell off. Once your hops are spent, you cannot dispose of them outside. You need to make sure you throw them in the trash, do something with them so that they aren't left outside. Hops are extremely toxic to dogs. So if you live in an area with dogs, your neighbors have dogs, you have dogs, don't leave them somewhere where dogs can get into them, because they will eat them. Dogs will eat anything, and it will kill them. There's something in it that their body just can't handle. So make sure you dispose of the hops properly. And like I said before, just steep this, pull it in and out just like you would tea. And that's basically it. And then I'm going to go do something right now, another little tip. I wouldn't call it a secret, but something that'll get you a little better success with your malt extract. So let's go inside.